What if a single, unseen act could plunge not merely a city or a nation, but an entire continent, Europe, into an era of darkness, cold, and uncertainty? Imagine waking before dawn to find that the security you take for granted, warmth, light, the familiar hum of industry, has become a pawn in a game played far above your head. Before the sun even rose, a silent tremor rushed down the Russian gas pipeline that threads its way across Belarus, a steel artery supplying energy to tens of millions. In that moment, a barely perceptible drop in pressure rippled through the system. On the surface, it seemed technical, a blip, perhaps a maintenance issue. But for those attuned to the rhythms of European energy, it felt more like a shot fired in a shadow war. In Minsk, officials clung to bland reassurances, cloaked in technical jargon and bureaucratic calm. Yet behind closed doors and in hushed conversations, concern grew. This was not a routine repair. It felt like the first move in a high-stakes standoff, one where the comfort of millions and the fate of economies hung by a thread. By midday, the transformation was visible. Anonymous gas compressor stations, once mundane and ignored, became focal points of national anxiety. Military trucks appeared, soldiers took up posts, and barbed wire fences went up overnight. These facilities, usually maintained with little fanfare, now looked like fortresses, with guards pacing nervously and access tightly restricted. Reliable information was nearly impossible to find. Authorities issued vague, sometimes contradictory updates. Rumors swirled. Was it sabotage, a technical blunder, or the deliberate opening move in a new kind of warfare? In corporate offices from Brussels to Berlin, and in chilly apartments from Warsaw to Vienna, people realized that what they had always taken for granted, their heat, their lights, the very basics of daily life, were now subject to the whims of distant power brokers. The stakes could not be higher. If this moment is dismissed as a technical hiccup, as a mere fluke of infrastructure, then Europe's governments and citizens risk staying blind to the real game at play. A game where the cost is measured not just in euros, but in security, unity, and the autonomy of entire nations. Let us unravel how this crisis truly began, why it matters, and why it is about so much more than a single broken pipeline. Our journey takes us from the first whisper of pressure loss, through the cascading panic, to the frantic negotiations and hard choices that followed. This is the story of how the destiny of a continent was shaped not in the public eye, but in secret, at the behest of those who control the flow of energy. Beneath the calm surface of daily life, Europe's energy security has long teetered on a knife's edge. One decision, one act, away from chaos. For decades, Russian natural gas has quietly powered Europe's industries and homes. The system is intricate, a web of contracts, pipelines, and dependencies, with Belarus serving as the crucial gateway. Like a narrow bridge between worlds, Belarus connects Moscow to Berlin, Paris, and cities beyond. On a bleak autumn morning, the first thread snapped. In the control rooms of Belarus, alarms shrieked as pipeline pressure plummeted. What should have been another mundane Tuesday exploded into a continental emergency. The last time Europe faced such a sudden energy crisis, during the oil shocks of the 1970s, the world changed. Then, as now, leaders realized that energy was more than a commodity. It was a weapon, a tool of diplomacy and coercion. Minsk rushed out statements, blaming technical issues. Broken valves, failed sensors. These were plausible explanations. But insiders on both sides of the border saw the pattern. The failure was too timely, too synchronized with political events. Only hours before, European Union leaders in Brussels had debated new sanctions against Russia and discussed shifting away from Russian energy. Barely had the ink dried on these resolutions when the gas stopped. The chessboard had changed. Panic surged almost immediately. By mid-afternoon, natural gas prices soared, triggering a wave of uncertainty across markets. In Berlin, Paris, and Warsaw, government ministers canceled their schedules and rushed into emergency meetings. power plants scrambled to switch fuel sources, and millions of ordinary citizens, families, pensioners, workers, rushed to hardware stores for heaters, firewood, and anything that could provide warmth in the coming cold. The anxiety that swept Europe was not just economic, it was existential. The comfort of modern life, warm homes, bright lights, humming factories, was revealed to be an illusion, dependent on decisions made far away. In a single day, energy had shifted from being a background concern to the centerpiece of European security. For years, Europe had ignored warnings. Experts, analysts, and even some politicians had cautioned that over-reliance on a single supplier, especially one with a record of using energy as leverage, was a dangerous gamble. The continent's faith in the perpetual flow of Russian gas was built on wishful thinking, that politics could be contained, that markets would always find a way. This crisis shattered those illusions. The cost of complacency was paid not just in billions of euros lost each day, but in the terrifying realization that, at any moment, the lights could go out for reasons beyond anyone's control. But what truly triggered the shutdown? Who gave the order, and who stood to profit from the turmoil? To answer these questions, we must peer into the opaque world of energy geopolitics, a realm where every move is calculated, and the stakes are as high as they come. To understand the crisis, we need to follow the gas's journey from its source. The roots are complex, woven through decades of clandestine deals, old resentments, and fragile balances. In the 1990s, as the Soviet Union collapsed, Western Europe rushed to secure stable energy supplies. Russian gas, abundant and relatively cheap, became the backbone of this new order. Yet, every contract, every pipeline, was also a lever, a tool for influence. Belarus, as the main transit country, often found itself caught between Russian pressure and European demands. On this particular morning, the silence in Moscow and Minsk was deafening. Official statements trickled in, but speculation exploded. Was the stoppage a technical mishap? Or was it, as some suspected, a deliberate warning, a flex of muscle in response to political pressure? Media outlets across Europe struggled to make sense of the confusion. Belarusian spokesmen insisted it was routine maintenance. But pipeline insiders, engineers, technicians, those who understood the workings of the system, quietly contradicted this. They pointed to the timing, the precision. Only hours after secret discussions in Brussels on harsher sanctions, the gas ceased to flow. A pivotal clue emerged. Sources inside the transmission network confirmed that the shutdown order came directly from Russian command, bypassing Belarusian authorities. The order was terse, encrypted, and gave no timeline for resumption, a clear signal this was no accident. On the ground, the disruption was immediate and brutal. At border checkpoints, convoys of trucks stretched for kilometers, drivers huddled in the cold, waiting for clearance that would not come. Compressor stations, usually alive with activity, fell silent. Crews stood idle, anxious, and hungry for answers. Emergency rationing swept from Vilnius to Vienna, dimming lights in homes and factories alike. In some towns, local authorities even considered reopening long-shuttered coal plants as a last resort. European leaders scrambled for options. Emergency committees convened in Berlin, Brussels, and Paris. Could gas be rerouted through alternative pipelines, the so-called Northern Corridor, or via the Baltic Sea? Technical experts warned that these routes lacked the capacity to make up the shortfall. Each lost hour meant colder cities, shuttered plants, and mounting financial losses. Winter contracts, often worth billions, hung by a thread. Markets convulsed. On the London Futures Exchange, gas prices surged by nearly a tenth in a single morning. In France and Germany, crowds stripped shelves of heaters and generators. Queues at fuel stations lengthened, tempers frayed, and prices soared before dawn. The memory of previous crises, the Ukrainian pipeline disputes of the early 2000s, the rolling blackouts in Eastern Europe, came rushing back. Phones rang off the hook in ministries and trading floors, but answers were elusive. Each nation improvised its own response, splintering the fragile unity of the European Union. Old alliances strained as national interests took precedence. Who would cut consumption first? Which industries would be shielded from rationing? Who would pay the mounting costs? The toll in money, trust, and diplomatic leverage multiplied by the hour. The crisis was no longer just about gas. It was about control, narrative, and the question of who would be left in the cold when the story was finally told. With every passing hour, new players began to circle, eager to seize advantage as Europe faltered. In the boardrooms of multinational energy companies, traders plotted ways to profit from the chaos. In Washington, officials saw an opportunity to expand American liquefied natural gas exports to a desperate Europe. As governments scrambled, alliances were tested. Old partnerships, forged over decades, were stretched to the breaking point. New, uneasy coalitions sprang up overnight. The continent that had once prided itself on unity now found itself divided by fear, necessity, and the relentless pressures of the market. The battle for energy control was only beginning. What started as a dispute over gas had escalated into a global test of power, one with consequences that stretched from Brussels and Berlin to Washington and the Kremlin. The world's capitals watched, calculated, and maneuvered for advantage. In Washington, press conferences broadcast unwavering support for European allies, but behind the scenes, the message was clear. American gas could save Europe, but not without a price. American diplomats accused Moscow of weaponizing energy. They warned that the Kremlin was tightening its grip, threatening to leave Europe exposed. Headlines screamed, "Gas is no longer simply a commodity. It is a tool of leverage, wielded with intent." For European leaders, the choices narrowed by the hour. On one side stood vital American and British partners, offering help but expecting allegiance. On the other, Russia loomed, now openly suspected of using energy as a warning. In Berlin, Paris, and Warsaw, ministers huddled in crisis meetings, every discussion circling the same grim reality. Time was running out, and options were few. Desperation set in. European buyers raced to secure emergency shipments of liquefied natural gas from as far as Qatar and the United States. Tankers were rerouted, contracts hastily rewritten. But the logistics were daunting. Securing, loading, and delivering new supplies across oceans could not be done overnight. Even in the most optimistic scenario, it would be several weeks before relief would arrive. Fear outpaced the actual crisis. News tickers flashed with speculation. Social media swarmed with rumors and images of empty shelves, long lines at fuel stations, and desperate families shivering in unheated apartments. Hashtags trended, amplifying panic. Analysts warned that the pipeline was no longer a commercial venture, but a weapon. Behind the scenes, the tension was palpable. Diplomats darted between embassies, clandestine meetings filled hotel conference rooms, and carefully timed leaks fueled the frenzy. Everywhere, the same question hung in the air. Who truly controls the gas? And what price must be paid to restore the flow? A single misstep risked plunging Europe into a full-blown emergency. Alliances, billions in commerce, and the livelihoods of millions hung in the balance. Each lost hour was another blow to Europe's security and autonomy. Yet, despite the headlines and high-level maneuvering, the final decision rested elsewhere. Only those who controlled the valves could decide when, and at what cost, the gas would flow again to Europe's homes and industries. Now, as the world watched, the fate of Europe hung in limbo. Some countries contemplated power rationing, even blackouts. But these measures, painful as they were, proved little more than temporary patches. The deeper problem, Europe's tangled and fragile energy web, remained unresolved. Unity among European nations cracked under pressure. Behind closed doors, fierce arguments flared. Who should cut consumption first? Which industries should be protected? Who would shoulder the burden of higher prices and lost output? Old alliances strained as national interests took precedence. Some states rushed to sign new deals, others pointed fingers, all desperate not to be blamed for failure or left in the cold. For ordinary families, the crisis was deeply personal. Utility bills sometimes doubled in a matter of weeks. Factory shifts vanished, pushing workers into uncertainty. People worried not only about warmth, but also about their jobs, their savings, and their future. The memory of the 2008 financial crisis, when livelihoods evaporated overnight, haunted many. When the gas finally flowed again, relief was mixed with unease. The crisis was not a fluke of infrastructure, but a clear warning. As long as energy is wielded as a political weapon, no country is truly safe. So what can be done? The solution is not easy, but history offers guidance. After the oil shocks of the 1970s, Western nations created the International Energy Agency and strategic oil reserves. Europe could take similar steps, building shared gas storage, diversifying suppliers, investing in renewables, and strengthening regional cooperation. Some countries, like Spain, already maintain robust liquefied natural gas terminals and interconnections, allowing them to weather supply shocks better than others. The Nord Stream pipelines, though controversial, were originally envisioned as a way to bypass transit risks. Yet, every new project brings its own vulnerabilities. Practical steps are essential. First, governments must coordinate emergency plans, ensuring that gas can be shared efficiently across borders. Second, investment in energy infrastructure, storage, terminals, grid upgrades must accelerate. Third, demand-side measures such as insulation programs, efficiency incentives, and public awareness campaigns can help reduce the strain during crises. Fourth, transparent, rules-based governance in energy markets can limit the risk of manipulation. But above all, Europe must confront the reality that energy is never just a market commodity. It is a tool of power, a strategic asset, and, if mismanaged, a weapon capable of causing widespread suffering. In the aftermath, the scars of the crisis remain. Leaders weigh new strategies, but the shadow of energy insecurity continues to haunt Europe's future. The lessons are clear. Dependency breeds vulnerability. Complacency invites disaster. This winter, Europe's fate was not set by the cold, but by choices made in secret rooms, by those who control the unseen valves of power. When Russian gas stopped, the rupture revealed more than empty pipelines. It exposed how true power, over warmth, jobs, and stability, remains tightly clenched by a select few beyond public reach. For now, the crisis has eased. Gas flows again, and leaders offer assurances that lessons have been learned. New contracts are signed, pipelines rerouted, and contingency plans drafted. Yet, to relax now would be to ignore the harshest warning. Energy is not just another commodity. It is a strategic weapon, capable of chilling economies, silencing cities, and shifting borders, without a single army mobilized or a shot fired. Consider the billions lost in a single week, the halted factories, the shivering families, the towns plunged into darkness. This is not merely a matter of profit or comfort. It is the autonomy, the dignity, and the security of nations that hang in the balance each time supply is threatened. If these lessons are forgotten, the next crisis may strike faster and cut deeper. The power to hurl a continent into chaos remains in the hands of very few. The real question is not whether this will happen again, but whether we are ready, and whether we have the courage to treat energy as far more than a matter of price per cubic meter. To close, reflect on this. Throughout history, control of energy has shaped the rise and fall of empires. From the coal fields of Britain to the oil wells of the Middle East, those who command the flow of energy command the fate of nations. Today, the battleground has shifted to pipelines and contracts, but the stakes remain the same. Europe now stands at a crossroads. Will it build resilience, unity, and independence, or remain vulnerable to the next turn of the valve? The future is unwritten, but the warning has been given. The next move is Europe's to make.